labeling theory focuses on our reactions to delinquency, and it looks at both official and unofficial or informal reactions. In particular, the impact of those reactions on juveniles. It looks at those who are labeled as bad and viewed as bad, and harsh rejecting responses are likely to increase further delinquency. They do so through a reduction in control, an increase in strain, an increase in social learning, and the fact that these delinquents begin to view themselves as delinquents. So, labeling theorists address 5 major questions: why certain acts are defined as delinquent or status offenses, how others react to that delinquency, the impact of the reaction to delinquency, why some juvenile offenders are more likely than others to experience that harsh rejecting reaction, and whether some juvenile offenders are more likely than others to respond to the harsh rejecting reaction with further delinquency. So there's 3 reactions to juveniles' delinquency. One is this harsh rejecting reaction, and that's the one with which we're most concerned. A failure to respond at all, and then condemning the behavior but accepting the juvenile. So for the harsh rejecting reaction, its essential features are the juvenile is labeled delinquent, that label views others to see them as bad people, and then they're rejected and treated in a harsh manner. So essentially, intervening can actually have a negative effect. This can also include informal reactions by parents, teachers, and others. Parents might become overly strict or reject the delinquent child. School personnel may harshly sanction them and segregate them. And we see this in some of these impacts through things like the school to prison pipeline and the Gun Free Schools Act. So another reaction would be failure to respond at all. And there could be several reasons for this. It could be that no one is aware of the delinquency. It could also be that the behavior is ignored or only mildly sanctioned. And this could be because it doesn't deserve a sanction, someone feels like they don't have good evidence, or they're overwhelmed with more serious behavior. There's also an argument here for a policy of radical non-intervention. Since most delinquency is minor and juveniles grow out of it, labeling can actually make those matters worse. Some recommendations then for reducing intervention are having police handle cases informally when possible and appropriate, having the court divert from court whenever possible, placing formally processed youth in community-based programs, and legalizing and decriminalizing status and minor delinquent acts. Some criticisms of this are, though, that we don't necessarily know when we're doing this whether or not that delinquency is going to lead to more delinquency. And in fact, non-intervention could lead to a reduction in direct and indirect control. Now, the best type of way to intervene is to condemn the behavior but accept the juvenile. So we want to sanction delinquent behavior but not overly harshly. And we want to make sure that we're helping this juvenile maintain their ties to conventional folks. This eliminates the negative effects of that harsh rejecting reaction and helps the juvenile develop internal control. A restorative justice approach entails a conference between offender, victim, family members, and community representatives. Focuses on helping the offender appreciate the harm caused by the act. And then a strategy is developed in order to help repair that harm. This could be an apology, restitution, community service. Once that harm is repaired, the offender is forgiven and ties to the community are restored. So, as I mentioned, that harsh rejecting response is the one we're most concerned about. And how does that then cause more delinquency? Well, it reduces various forms of control. Direct control over the juvenile may be lowered because parents and teachers may avoid them and apply harsh methods of discipline. Their stake in conformity is reduced because their ties with parents and teachers are weakened, and their investment in conventional society is weakened. And then, of course, their internal controls may also be weakened. They're less likely to condemn delinquency, and they may have weakened efforts at self-control. It also increases strain for the juvenile, making it more difficult to achieve goals and possibly having that loss of positive stimuli and presentation of negative stimuli. It can also increase their level of irritability and increasing their sensitivity to strains. It also increases social learning of delinquency. As those peers are rejected, they're going to associate with delinquent models who might reinforce that behavior and help them develop beliefs favorable to delinquency, and techniques of rationalizing it. And then finally, the big piece that labeling theory talks about is how they develop a negative self-concept or a delinquent self-concept. And the way we see ourselves is a function of how others view and treat us. So some juveniles viewed as bad may come to see themselves as bad. So then what increases that likelihood of a harsh response? How come some juveniles get a harsh rejecting response and others do not? Well, how frequent and serious is the delinquency that becomes known to others? So serious offenders are often viewed as bad people, and the justice system often punishes these offenders harshly. The socioeconomic characteristics of the juvenile might matter as well. Lower class juveniles lack financial resources, connections, and negotiating skills to negotiate mild treatment for their kids. The lower class, certain minority group members, and older juveniles often fit stereotypes of serious delinquents, and so they may be more likely to be treated as such. There are gender differences too. Males are more severely sanctioned for serious offenses, whereas females are more harshly sanctioned for status offenses. And the level of control and association with delinquent peers matters too. Those low in control who associate with delinquent peers are treated more harshly. They fit stereotypes of delinquent kids. They're less able to resist the efforts of others. They might lack close ties to conventional others, have poor problem-solving skills, and weak attachments to parents and teachers. And these points are illustrated with the study of the Saints and Roughnecks. So then, if a juvenile is met with this harsh rejecting response, what increases the likelihood that they'll respond with delinquency? Those that are high in strain, low in control, and believe delinquency is desirable or justified are more likely to respond with delinquency. Now, an ideal test to prove labeling theory would examine 3 groups of comparable offenders, each getting a different reaction. What most tests do is compare arrested delinquents to comparable delinquents who have not been arrested. And they do find slightly higher levels of subsequent delinquency for those who are arrested. But there's problems with this approach because many arrested juveniles don't experience that harsh rejecting reaction. And we also cannot assume that juveniles who weren't arrested don't experience a harsh rejecting reaction. They may be experiencing it from people other than the justice system.